The next one is pattern variables. Now, when we are looking at pattern variables, I'm sure you are already, or you have already been aware of the core ideas about pattern variables. Now, pattern variables as a thesis or as an idea is to be traced back to a very important concern that Parsons has. So let's first look at the questions. Analyze the relevance of pattern variables in the study of social change. Critically analyze Parsons' conception of pattern variables. Simple, critically analyze, right? Now, pattern variables, if you want to really come up with a solid introductory line, you can simply say when there is a conflict between motivational orientation and value orientation. So we are borrowing from Parsons' lingo. When there is a conflict between motivational and value orientations, the developing patterns are termed as pattern variables. This is how Parsons explains it. So you can always use this particular definition. So basically, Parsons is pointing out that there are different pattern variables he uses to kind of help us understand different, to describe and classify different societies, the values that are there and the norms that govern those societies, right? So this is a way in which description and classification of different societies is to be understood. Now, he basically uses pattern variables to explain the choices of action available to individuals in the social system as a collectivity. Now, remember, whenever we are talking about pattern variable A and B, it is extremely important. In fact, it is absolutely obligatory to get the sequence right. So if you are talking about A, you have to write ascription here and then achievement. Particular, universal, right? Otherwise, what will happen is diffused, specific, effectivity, effective, neutrality, and so on. Because there is a way in which this entire thing has been formulated. If one of these gets messed up, so here ascription, but if you write universal here in particular there, it's done. So basically, ascription versus achievement, diffuseness versus specificity. So there are 5 pattern variables. Particularism versus universalism, effectivity versus effective neutrality, and then of course collective orientation versus self-orientation. Now, pattern variables A are typical of simple societies, whereas pattern variables B are typical of modern societies. So this is modern and this is, and as I pointed out that Weber is basically, Parsons is basically borrowing a great deal from Ferdinand Tönnies, Gemein and Gesell. That's very much in the background, Gemeinschaft. So social change, according to Parsons, is some sort of a movement from pattern variable A to pattern variable B. So this is an interesting way in which we can look at social change from the vantage point of Parsons. And remember, as I pointed out, that Parsons considered his formulation of the pattern variables to be a kind of specification of Tönnies' Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. And Parsons basically also regards, this is important to remember, the first half of each pair as expressive. So this A is expressive, whereas this B is instrumental. Expressive and instrumental. So he considers this, the first set as expressive and the second as instrumental. And expressive aspects, so he also draws connection between pattern variables and AGIL. So basically integration adaptation and so basically expressive aspects refer to the integrative and tension management. So AG is expressive. Yeah, I think so. Expressive aspects refer to this is instrumental, and then IL is expressive. So this is something that we have here. So he regards the first half of the pairs as expressive, and then the second half as the as instrumental. Expressive aspects refer to the integrative and latent or tension management bit, and so basically taking care of the common task culture, how to integrate, etc. Whereas the instrumental refers to the goal or attainment and adoption aspects. These are characteristics, people, roles associated with ideas, problem solving, getting the task done, etc. So usually they are associated with male roles, the instrumental one, and the expressive one are associated with female roles. Now, of course, feminists have questioned the Parsonian framework here, this very problematic distinction between expressive and instrumental, because feminist argument is that as such, this is not natural, this is cultural, meaning that we as individuals have brought this upon ourselves. There is, as individuals, whether men or women, we actually carry within ourselves the capacity and the capability to carry out both expressive and instrumental in equal measure. But because of a certain kind of a gendered socialization, what happens is that as we grow up as men and women, we end up sort of aligning ourselves more with instrumental or expressive, depending on the gender we identify with. Now, what are the criticisms if you have to criticize, if you have to critically look at pattern variables? In real life, people point out the dilemma of choice is much more taxing. It's not that simple. Parsons would have it very easy. Two things. So real life situation is much worse. The dilemma does not dawn upon everyone the same way, right? Not everyone really experiences the dilemma the same way. For a man, it might be one way. For a woman, it might be another way. For a Dalit, for a non-Dalit, for a child, for an adult, for a widow, for a married, and so on and so forth. For example, if you're looking at a patriarchal society, then of course in a patriarchal society, a man does not really confront the dilemma exactly the way a woman does. Critics have also, another problem is that how do you make sure that this is the complete set, right? What's the proof of that? On what grounds can we really say that we only have 5 and not 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 15 or just 4, etc. Then there is also a possibility that an individual might be, unlike what Parsons would have us believe, there is a possibility that an individual is adhering to pattern variable B in 4 respects, but is adhering to pattern variable A in 1. How do you deal with that? And then, of course, a certain kind of issue with the explanatory sweep, that it tries to explain a lot of things in one go, and that is something that's not very good.